Good evening, fellow Minnesotans, listeners and viewers around the state, members of the university community, and most importantly, students. My name is Tom Williams, and I'm the president of the Minnesota State Student Association. On behalf of myself, the fellow leaders beside me, the Student Association, and Minnesota State University Mankato, I welcome you to our campus on this fall evening for a discussion about the future of our great state. Minnesota State University Mankato is a great university that for over 140 years has been serving Minnesota, the nation, and the world. Minnesota State prides itself on being a place where learning produces big ideas and real-world thinking. Our great state faces difficult challenges. So tonight, I ask the candidates, much like how the university asks us students, to take their big ideas and couple it with real-world thinking, combining their knowledge and passion to help the people of Minnesota to go further than they and this state ever thought possible. Our moderators tonight are Joe Spear and Bill Salisbury. Tonight, please help me welcome gubernatorial candidates Tom Emmer, Mark Dayton, and Tom Horner to MSU.
Good evening. I'm Joe Spear, editor of the Mankato Free Press, here tonight with Bill Salisbury from the St. Paul Pioneer Press. On behalf of the Debate Minnesota Foundation, we welcome you to tonight's gubernatorial debate.
Debate Minnesota supporters are from different backgrounds and political persuasions. Some of them are here with us tonight in the audience. They all share concerns about the impact of negative advertising and money in politics and the lack of civility in our political discourse. Debate Minnesota proposes that we take a lesson from Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas and carry our issues back to the public square where the real power lies in this nation with the people. And, as with the famous Lincoln-Douglas debates of 1858, we believe that the best way to restore civility in the election process is through substantive, content-based discussions between candidates, the people, and their communities.
We will begin our debates with 2-minute opening statements by the candidates. They have drawn numbers to determine the order. Each candidate will have 2 minutes with a 1-minute follow-up. The order will rotate throughout the night. Each candidate will be given the opportunity to make a 1-minute closing statement. We thank our student timekeepers tonight for helping us keep on schedule and on track. We wish to remind you now to hold any further applause until the conclusion of tonight's debate. Our first opening statement goes to Mr. Emmer.
Thank you very much. I don't know what you want us to stand or you want us to stay seated. All right, that means seated, I think. Thank you, Minnesota State, Mankato, and thank you to Debate Minnesota and everybody who's taken time to show up and be part of this process. It is an honor and a privilege to be running for the office of Governor of the state of Minnesota, and I really appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself to you tonight with these fine gentlemen that are up here with me. Briefly, we only have 2 minutes to the introduction. I'll give you as this. There are 3 people running for office of governor in the state of Minnesota, but there are only 2 messages. On the one side, my colleagues believe that we have to raise billions of dollars of new taxes. They argue that if we don't raise billions of dollars of new taxes, we must cut services. I disagree with them completely. I believe that it's time for us to get control of the out-of-control spending, start to redesign the delivery system of government so that we can deliver the services that citizens in this state expect government to deliver in the most efficient manner possible. And then we have to reduce taxes and streamline regulations to start growing jobs again in this state. Briefly, the discussion I hope to have tonight is that the next governor and the next legislature in this state will actually have more to spend. Our general revenues are expected to grow 7 to 8%. Simply put, we expect government to purchase the services that people expect within the 7 to 8% of new revenue. In other words, live within its means, and then we need to start growing government or growing jobs again in the state of Minnesota. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. Look forward to having a good and spirited discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Emmer. No clapping. Sorry, have to enforce the rule right away. No clapping, thank you. Mr. Horner, you're next. 2 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, and I want to thank Senator Dayton, Representative Emmer for joining me in yet another debate, and thank all of you for attending. You know, when former governors Arne Carlson, Al Quie, Jesse Ventura endorsed me, they all said the same thing, that this is one of the most important elections that they can remember. And they came to that conclusion because they really believe that Minnesotans now have rejected the policy of no new taxes. We're not going to return that policy to the governor's office in 2010, and I think Minnesota voters have made that decision. The question in this election is whether we're going to swing that political pendulum all the way to the left. Will we continue to invest in a tax system that frankly doesn't work very well? And we can call it tax the rich, we can call it whatever we want. It's a tax system that is raising property taxes and raising income taxes, and it's not working very well. Or will we settle on the middle? Will we take a course that promotes innovation, that says we have to change the way we tax, change the way we spend? We can't afford the status quo. Every major newspaper, almost without exception, in Minnesota has endorsed me. And they've done it because they've said that I'm the opportunity to break the gridlock in Minnesota. I'm the opportunity to move the state to the future. Innovation isn't going to come from all of the special interests on the left any more than it's going to come from the special interests on the right. Minnesota shouldn't be for sale, yet that's what we're seeing in this last week of the campaign, where millions of dollars of national money are coming into the state. I haven't accepted PAC dollars, I haven't accepted outside contributions, because I believe that we need a governor who starts with the ability to engage the public. That's where our future is going to come from. I have the plan to accomplish this. I'm looking forward to having the conversation with you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Mr. Dayton, your turn, 2 minutes.
I want to thank Minnesota State Mankato, the alma mater of my terrific campaign manager, Dana Anderson, and Debate Minnesota for hosting this, our 27th debate. You know, this is an election that's about the future of Minnesota, and it's about your future. It's about putting people back to work all over Minnesota, and I bring the experience of serving twice as Minnesota's Commissioner of Economic Development. And I know one of the cornerstones to our economic success in the past, as it will be again in the future, is the best possible education system. So when I learned that Minnesota State Mankato has had to eliminate 92 positions, and one of the students with whom we just spoke can't graduate on time because of lack of course offerings because of those cuts, I know that we're going in the wrong direction in terms of the future of our state. Similarly with K-12 education, overcrowded classrooms, 4-day school weeks. In a state, Minnesota, where we value public education, where we know how vitally important it is. My proposal is to increase taxes on the wealthiest Minnesotans, ask them to pay a fairer share of the taxes to this state, and invest that money in education and other essential services. My colleagues here would increase either the sales tax on clothing and consumer services, such as haircuts and car repairs, or make cuts to local government aids. And as I found out from the local officials in Austin earlier today, that would result in higher property taxes in Austin, Mankato, and other cities throughout the state. I believe that mine's a fairer approach for Minnesota. I believe it's a better approach, and I believe that those investments that I would make in education and other services are ones that will put us on the path to further growth and prosperity for Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Go to the first question.
Yeah, the first question is about what kind of leadership qualities you gentlemen would bring to the governor's office. And Mr. Horner, we'll start with you. You mentioned you break the gridlock. How would you put aside partisanship and legislative gridlock that have hampered progress on major issues at the Capitol for the last 6 years?
Well, and again, every major newspaper that is endorsed, almost without exception, has said that I'm the one that has the ability to do that. And I think you do it in a couple of ways. One is that, like Jesse Ventura, appoint a cabinet of people who are there because of their qualifications, their skills, their ability to engage with Minnesotans across the political spectrum. But secondly, I think the most important opportunity for the next governor, and the only way the next governor is going to be successful, if he doesn't look backwards, if he doesn't try to forge consensus only among Democrats and Republicans at the legislature, but engages the public, goes over the head of the legislature to talk to the public, engage the 60 to 70% of Minnesotans that have been forced to the sidelines, bring them into the public, and get the consensus there. And I think, frankly, what we see in my two opponents here is Senator Dayton with no ability to do that, and Representative Emmer not having shown any great interest in doing that. I think when you look at my experience in public service, in community service, in my professional life, I'm the one who's shown the ability to reach out to the public, to engage Minnesotans free from special interests, and forge the consensus there, bring that back to the legislature with the commitment that I'll be the lightning rod. I'll be the one that provides political cover for Republicans, Democrats, independents who are willing to come to the table, take the tough votes. And while I would never promise to be a one-term governor, because you can't be a lame duck from day one, I've always said that if in providing the political cover, if in being the political lightning rod, the consequences of that are we move Minnesota forward, but I'm not reelected for a second term, I'm okay with that.
Senator Dayton, how would you put aside partisanship and prevent legislative gridlock?
Well, Bill, I've served 9 years in the executive branch of state government. I've headed 3 different state agencies. I'm the only candidate here who's had that executive branch experience. And I worked with DFLers and with Republicans consistently throughout that time to advance, as Commissioner of Economic Development, the economic development agenda to help put people back to work throughout the state, as state auditor to get the funding necessary to audit local governments and make sure that they're providing their services as cost effectively as possible. In the United States Senate, I served for the entire 6 years under a Republican president, and 4.5 of those 6 years with a Republican majority in the U.S. Senate. And I worked with senators on both sides of the aisle. I was able in my last year in the Senate to get the first congressional funding for the pioneering program of the Minnesota National Guard Beyond the Yellow Ribbon, which provided support services to our returning Iraq and Afghan war soldiers, heroes who've served there, and to their families to help them with their reintegration in society. I worked with Senator John McCain in Arizona with then the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Republican Senator Ted Stevens, to obtain that funding. So I have a proven ability to work with members of both sides or all sides of the aisle to get done with the people's agenda, what's best for the people of Minnesota.
Representative Emmer, you've lived through 6 years of partisanship and a lot of gridlock. What would you do to change things at the Capitol?
Well, as I listen to my colleagues, Bill, 2 things that come to mind. One, you got to stand for something, and you can't be everything to everybody. I think leadership is about leading people to where they need to be, not where they already are. How you do that is you articulate a very clear and concise vision for where it is you believe we need to go, and then you communicate that to people on both sides. This election really is no longer about Republican, Democrat, Independent. I'm very proud to be the Republican endorsed candidate, but it really is about more than that. It's about common sense. What we've been doing hasn't been working, and I think you start, Bill, first by, again, articulating very clearly what your vision is for the future of the state of Minnesota. We are the only candidate that has put out a complete and detailed budget that everyone running for office and everyone voting can go look at and see exactly what we would do with the 7 to 8% more in revenue that the government will have to spend in the next legislative session. Senator Dayton is $1 billion off still, and Mr. Horner's $2.5 billion off. In order to get people to buy into your vision, it's got to be complete, and you've got to be able to articulate what it is, and it starts with having a complete and detailed plan. Second, I think we got to change the process. Right now, the governor of the state of Minnesota simply has the ability to unallot. I would like to see a bill that I offered a couple years ago called First Things First get passed into law right away. It would give the governor of the state of Minnesota the ability to declare a fiscal emergency, which is defined simply as our revenues are not going to meet our expenses. And once that's declared, the legislature has 45 days, the Senate and the House, to present a balanced budget of their own. So the governor would put one out in the first year of the biennium, end of January, early February. If they declared that on the first day of the legislative session, it would cause the legislature to put out a complete and detailed budget by middle of February. Now you got all of March, April, and 3 weeks in May to find out where the two sides agree and get those off the table and actually identify your points of disagreement so you can balance the budget and get first things first done.
Let me follow up by asking who your kind of leadership role models are. Mr. Emmer, which Minnesota governor do you admire most?
I don't have game cards for Minnesota governors.
Excuse me, I apologize. To Mr. Horner.
Oh.
Well, I think...
Do you have game cards for Minnesota governors? Yeah.
How could I say anything other than the governors that I admire most are those who have endorsed me?
Pick one.
Well, I mean, I admire Governor Carlson. He came in with a deficit that in a percentage of the budget almost as significant as the one the next governor will face. He resolved that in ways that were fair, that were honest, that were bipartisan. But then he turned around and his next step was to say, now let's engage in reform. Let's fix the problem that we have in health care, and brought together a bipartisan panel of Republicans, Democrats. The first offering wasn't up to the standards that we need in Minnesota, and so he went at it again. And he went at it in a way that engaged the public. You know, when you start with policies, putting a stake in the ground on tax the rich that even most Democrats don't support, and you're way off here to the left, or cut spending, and many Republicans don't support that, and you're way off here to the right, how do you build bipartisanship? When you allow all of the special interests to come in, spending $3-4 million to beat up on the other parties, to beat up on the other politicians, how do you turn around and then say, I'm going to be a bipartisan leader? You've got to start with bipartisanship. You have to start with a commitment to the future. You have to start with a track record and the experience that says, that's what I've done in my community service career, that's what I've done in my professional career.
Please stick to 1 minute responses on this question.
So 1 minute on the follow-up?
Pardon me?
Just 1 minute on the follow-up?
Are we supposed to be watching this down here? Is there a...
We're easily confused.
Oh, right here.
People are here. All right, it's okay.
We haven't done this enough.
No. What did you say the other night? 12,875.
Yeah, we're right up there.
Senator
Dayton.
Senator Dayton was supposed to tell us when we were done.
Right. Senator Dayton, would you tell us which Minnesota governor you admire most?
Governor Rudy Perpich. I served twice as Commissioner of Economic Development and Commissioner of Energy and Economic Development. Because he was a jobs governor, he was committed to economic growth in our state, and he was successful in achieving that. And because he was proactive, he was engaged and working tirelessly day and night to make this a better state. And Governor Perpich had a sign on his office wall that I will put back up if I'm governor, says, none of us are as smart as all of us. And part of his success was he was a sponge for other people's good ideas from all different points of view. And I would adopt that approach as well. And the other governor is Governor Harold Stassen, who was a reform governor, came in and reformed the administrative processes of state government, and then had the patriotism and the integrity to resign the office and go serve our country in World War II.
Representative Emmer, who is your favorite governor?
Bill, I wouldn't phrase it that way. You said, who do you admire?
Okay, who do you admire?
It's not a matter of being favored. As I told you when I thought you were addressing Emmer instead of Horner, I don't have governor game cards that I go back to. I would tell you this. I admire everybody who's ever served in the office. I admire everybody that's ever put themselves out there and said, I'm willing to run on the principles and ideals that I believe will put this state in a better condition than how we found it. So anybody and everybody that's run for the office and frankly, not only run, but been elected. I mean, anybody, and I think these two gentlemen would agree with me, the one thing that we've learned is this is a long road. And you put yourself out there every day sharing your vision for the future of this state with Minnesotans all over the place. Anybody that's willing to do that, I have the most admiration for.
Thank you, Mr. Emmer. We'll go on to the next question. Again, regarding leadership, you'll have 2 minutes to answer this. Imagine that you have been elected and you are at your first meeting with your cabinet. Give us your first talk. What would you say to your cabinet that lays out your vision, the expectations you have for them, and how you measure your success? Mr. Dayton goes first.
Oh,
I would tell them I want excellence. I believe in government, but I believe in the importance of government serving the people of this state. Once we're elected or appointed, our responsibility is to all the people of Minnesota, and it's to do the very best we can. It's, as I attempted to do in the 3 state agencies that I headed, to instill that same ethic of excellence and service to all state employees, to tell them that our positions are paid for by the hard-earned tax dollars of the people of Minnesota, and we owe them responsiveness, we owe them efficiency, we owe them courtesy. We may not be able to agree with everything they'd like us to do, but we have a responsibility to respond in that kind of fashion. When I set up in my Senate office the health care helpline and provided service to those who either were denied the health care that their physicians said they needed by their insurers, or were denied payment for those health care services, my staff would say, well, we'll get back to you within 24 hours, and people were astonished. And then they were even more astonished when the person actually did that. Well, I think that should be the norm. That should be commonplace. That should be the right of any citizen to expect that they can call someone who's paid with their tax dollars and receive that kind of courtesy and that kind of swift response. So I will do my utmost to instill that ethic of quality service, of commitment to the people of Minnesota, and then I will remind people that we are the stewards of the resources that belong to all the people of this state. So it is our responsibility to manage them in a way that looks out for now and the needs of our citizens today, and also our children and grandchildren and generations still to come, and to do that to the utmost of our ability.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dayton. Mr. Emmer, you're next. Again, just expectations you have of them. How will you measure your success and vision?
Well, first, it would start long before that first meeting. I would say immediately after the election on November 2nd, if we are elected to serve as governor, we will start by taking apart every agency of government. I want to know, what was the original mission? How did it start? What is the mission today? Is that mission still a priority of government? And if so, is it being delivered in the most efficient manner? You got to start at the beginning, and you've got to build it again. The governor right now has 22 cabinet positions. That's too many. I would like to see a secretariat model that some have called a secretariat model. Reduce that to 6 or 9 people that have either responsibility for one area of government or more than one area of government. And once that's put together, Joe, and by the way, it shouldn't be, again, based on party. It should be on the best people available to do the job you're talking about. Then it has to be about customer service. Because I think too many of us that have been outside of government have the feeling that government, we have to ask permission all the time, and when we call, we get recordings. We've got to have government serving us. So it's about customer service. It's about making sure that Minnesotans understand government's here to work for them. And I'll give you a quick example in the minute I've got left. I have a neighbor who was given the responsibility as the comptroller of a national wheel bearing manufacturing company of expanding his company's manufacturing business. Got a call from the state of Iowa. They took him down to Iowa, showed him the state, wanted him to expand. Got similar calls South Dakota, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. When he called the state of Minnesota, the response he got was, this is what you must do if you want to expand in Minnesota. We need to change that attitude. How would we measure our success? One, did we find efficiencies within government? Were we able to deliver more for less and better? And second, are we growing jobs again in the state of Minnesota? Do people start to invest again in Minnesota and create new opportunities?
Thank you, Mr. Emmer. Mr. Horner.
Well, first of all, I would remind them that they are there because they are smarter than I am. They're there because they're not Democrats, not Republicans. They're Minnesotans, and that's what they need to put first. Secondly, I would tell them they have to start by asking the right question. The right question isn't how much are we going to spend, how are we going to defend this interest, how are we going to pay off that favor, but what is it that we need to achieve as Minnesotans to assure the prosperity of the state. And thirdly, I would tell them to go out and talk to Minnesotans, not just the usual suspects, but the people who are affected by all of these programs and policies, the people who have the innovative ideas, the people who have the new solutions. I would tell them to be bold, to challenge the status quo, to come back with innovation, and to bring back solutions that are in the best interests of all Minnesotans. And here's what I hope they would come back with. There's a great program in the Department of Health that dealt with low-income kids who had asthma. terrific program that said, we're going to go in and figure out what triggers the attacks for these low-income kids, and how do we keep them out of the emergency rooms. And they went in, they worked with the families, they figured out what was triggering the attacks, how to correct all of those things. Over the course of this program, they were able to save an average of $2,000 per child per year, keeping them out of the emergency rooms. That's how you restructure healthcare costs. But the other thing this program did, it saved kids, it kept them in school, it reduced absences by an average of 7 days per child per year. Put it over the course of an academic career, 12-year academic career, that's nearly half of a school year. There's the education gap. There's the achievement gap. That's how we're going to get our kids up to speed, and that's just from one intervention, by being bold, by being innovative, by looking at healthcare not just as a national program, but as a community solution, and by looking at the achievement gap not just as education, but as other issues.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. 1 minute quick follow-up to you, Mr. Dayton again. Would you describe yourself to your administrative team as the coach or the CEO?
Well, the CEO and the coach. You know, the chief executive of the state has that responsibility to make the decisions and to make decisions in the best interests of all Minnesotans, but it's also a teaching role, and it's one of the successful coaches once said it's getting people to work together to achieve a common goal of being the very best that they could possibly be. So it's definitely a team effort as well as a leadership position.
Same question to you, Mr. Emmer.
I would say a CEO. Yes, there are probably similarities when it comes to coaching, but this is the business of the state of Minnesota that we need to run. And when you design a leadership team, you're going to appoint the best and the brightest, hopefully, to the areas of responsibility that you dictate. You want them to have the same principles, limited government that delivers services in the most efficient, affordable, sustainable manner, and individual liberty and economic freedom is what you want them to embrace. But I think the way you handle leadership is everybody gets input. You want them on the team because they bring something of value to the team. But the one caveat is, if you are the CEO, if you are the leader, at the end of the day, there is one final decision, and that rests with the leader.
Thank you, Mr. Emmer. Mr. Horner, same question.
I would describe myself as a CEO and tell them if they wanted to coach, they could go to TCF Stadium. Oh, wait a second. You know, I think Minnesota needs a leader. Minnesota needs somebody who's going to make executive decisions, but make executive decisions that are in the best interests of all people. And that is going to take some firm, solid decisions. It's going to take leadership. And I think the best CEOs, when you look at the tradition of CEO leadership in Minnesota, the best ones are those who are leaders, who are innovative, who are bold, who aren't stuck in the past, who don't rely on the status quo, who always are challenging the status quo and pushing out for something new. That's the kind of CEO that I would be.
Thank you, Mr. Horner.
Now we're going to switch over and start talk a little bit about your vision for Greater Minnesota. And I'll start with you, Senator Dayton. A Blandin Foundation poll released last week showed 43% of rural residents do not believe that legislators and governors fairly address their needs. They believe state officials don't think their well-being is as important as that of Twin Cities residents. What policies will you put in place that will help, if any, assure residents of Greater Minnesota that you will treat them fairly?
Well, Bill, I've held 114 community meetings around Minnesota, one in every county at least. And I can count on one hand with fingers left over the number of people who believe they've gotten better quality service from state agencies than they did 5 or 10 years ago. And the farther you get from St. Paul, the more the feeling of disconnect and even distrust towards state agencies. From local government officials, mayors, city council members who were promised that local government aids would be protected, and then found those promises broken by the current governor, who for example, the mayor of Wadena, when I went up there shortly after the devastating tornado last spring, but amazingly, with whole blocks flattened, there was no loss of life. And the mayor said, you know, we're a poor community here. 1/3 of the residents of Wadena have a net worth of less than $15,000. We couldn't have afforded to provide the emergency warning system, the emergency response capability that we had without that support. I remember the mayor up in International Falls saying that she had been promised by the Governor Plenty before the last election that he would protect local government aids. So they cut their property tax levy by 16%, and then after he failed to do so, they had to go back and raise that property tax levy back up to what it was before. So the integrity of the relationship between state government and local government is key. And then the economic development efforts, agriculture and agricultural part of our state. I was a big proponent of ethanol ED5 when I was in the Senate. Tourism, when I worked as Commissioner of Economic Development, had a responsibility for tourism. Governor Purpich was a true visionary in recognizing the importance of that, the investments the state made in tourism advertising and promotion brought back a multiple. Governor Quee started the Star Cities program for economic development. I expanded that when I was commissioner, and that assisted local governments all over the state in identifying business opportunities and to create worked with businesses to create additional jobs. I would revitalize that program as governor.
Mr. Horner, same question to you. How would you assure Greater Minnesota that you would treat residents there fairly?
Well, I think in my campaign that I have made those assurances, and I think it is reflected, again, in how editorials, how leaders are responding to me. The Bemidji Pioneer, in its editorial, said that I was the best hope for a strong rural Minnesota. And I think it comes not just from putting more public dollars into rural Minnesota, although I do have a strong commitment and an absolute commitment to LGA and continuing the funding there, but I think it's also creating an environment in which our rural communities can succeed. It's making sure that we have policies that protect a strong rural health infrastructure that allows people to get world-class quality health care and gives them that asset to attract new businesses. That we are making sure education, K-12, our great two-year schools, the four-year universities around Minnesota are doing their jobs, are integrated into the local regional economies, that we have the right infrastructure, that we're building out the 10-ton roads, the rail, the bridges, the water and sewer that makes it possible to attract businesses, that we're investing in research, that we're building the economy of the future, not just paying for the mistakes of the past, that we're making investments in new applications for agriculture, for energy, for manufacturing, and then that we have a tax policy that doesn't tax small businesses out of job creation. And that's the problem, Senator Dayton, is that so many of our businesses in rural Minnesota are sub-S LLCs that would be killed by your proposal. DigiKey and Thief River Falls would lose hundreds of jobs by your proposal. That's not the right way to go. But lastly, when you look at that Blandin survey, one of the most compelling statistics was that 9 out of 10 people said, engage me, make me part of the solutions. We want to be part of the solutions. And I think that's critical. I think any governor has to say to rural Minnesotans, we're in this together, you're partners in the solutions, we're going to create this together.
Thank you very much. Representative Emmer, how would you treat Greater Minnesota fairly?
Well, I think the Blandin report actually is simply a restatement of our platform that we're running on for this office. The Blandin report that was just issued for Greater Minnesota says very clearly that the #1 issue for Greater Minnesota residents is high-quality paying jobs. And then very importantly, and I suggest maybe my colleagues want to take a look at it, the next thing that they talk about in the report are taxes, spending, and governance. It's not just about creating a business environment to once again draw new investment and create high-quality, good-paying jobs in Greater Minnesota, in fact, all of Minnesota, but taxes are too high. Spending is out of control, and governance, people in rural Minnesota, Greater Minnesota, like many Minnesotans, feel that their government is just not listening to them anymore. It's time to make sure that government starts to serve the people as opposed to the people being constantly asked to serve it more of their tax money. So when you look at the Blandin report, what we are going to do for Greater Minnesota is the same thing we propose to do for all of Minnesota. Let's redesign government to be more efficient and deliver the services people expect, and then let's create a business environment by streamlining regulations and lowering taxes to start growing jobs again in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Emmer. A quick follow-up for everyone, 1 minute. You all talked about jobs in rural Minnesota, and I believe the League of Minnesota Cities cites a property tax figure for a $1 million commercial business in Wells, Minnesota, would pay twice as much in property tax as one in Eagan. Is there a problem with that? Mr. Dayton, you would go first.
There's certainly a problem, and the problem is the inequity in the property tax system. Businesses in Minnesota pay more than 4 times more in property taxes than they do in any other tax. And it's the same League of Greater Minnesota Cities who said that Representative Emmer's cuts in local government aids and school aids would result in higher property taxes. The formula that the Department of Revenue uses is for every $1 reduction in local government aids, property taxes go up by 67 cents. When I was in Austin, Minnesota earlier this morning, a city which has reduced in the number of positions as of most cities and most counties throughout this state, and Governor Flenney's cut the number of state employee positions by 11% over his 2 terms. So governments have cut back, but they said if we were to cut local government aids again, property taxes would go up even greater than 67 cents for every $1 reduction. So, the fiscal integrity of the relationship between the state of Minnesota and local governments is absolutely essential to enable people to live in greater Minnesota and to be able to afford to and have the property taxes not soar uncontrollably.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Mr. Horner, could you address that question?
Well, absolutely there's an inequity, but I would say, Senator Dayton, the way to address the inequity in property taxes isn't to raise the income tax to that same level of problem. I mean, you can't add more taxes to businesses. That's when you kill the job creators, you kill jobs in rural Minnesota. And that's what your tax proposal would do. It taxes the small businesses that are creating the jobs. And so absolutely, we have to address property taxes. And I've done that in my budget proposal. I think we do need to equalize the taxes for businesses in rural Minnesota and metro, and between commercial property and other properties. But we also have to look at agricultural property taxes and understand that in so many communities we now have ag land being taxed for its speculative value, not its production value. We need to make sure that we're taxing agriculture for its production value, that we're doing that fairly and allowing communities to thrive and farmers to stay on their land.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Mr. Emmer.
Yeah, and I believe it is, Joe, and that's why in our, again, the only plan that's complete and detailed and doesn't have a $2.5 billion hole or a $1 billion hole, we provided commercial property tax reductions of about $100 million over the next 2 years. I do think it's a huge issue, but I also have to address the local government aid fallacies that Senator Dayton's putting out. People need to understand that in the state of Minnesota, we've got over 800 cities, and of the 800 plus cities in the state of Minnesota, it's only 20 cities that get over 50% of the LGA dollars, the local government aid dollars, and only 5 of those 20 get almost 40%. So the suggestion that somehow you get border-to-border tax, property tax increases with reductions in LGA is simply a fallacy. And I would also suggest that if the state government not spending that dollar, the local government where you get more responsible representation, if it's 67 cents, I don't know why the senator would be opposed to taxpayers saving 33 cents on every dollar.
Next question. Let's go back to the Blanded Foundation poll, which found that 4 out of 5 rural Minnesotans believe it's important to pursue alternative energy options such as solar, wind, and biofuels. What will you do to pursue alternative energy resources? Senator Dayton, let's start with you.
Well, I've proposed an energy savings fund modeled after what's been initiated at the University of Minnesota Morris, where they've retrofitted the buildings for more efficient energy use. That provides jobs in those projects. They've retrofitted the heating and cooling system to use alternative energy. In this case, they're buying corn stalks from area farmers. That puts money into the local economy. They're pelletizing and then using a gasifier, which, when effective, they believe will save taxpayers $1 million a year in lower energy costs. So it's a win-win-win scenario all the way around, and I would create a revolving loan fund modeled after that approach and start with the Minnesota public colleges and universities, such as Minnesota State Mankato, make those same investments, and then with the savings and lower energy costs, and they say that a successful project pays for itself with lower energy costs in 5 to 7 years, then I loan that money out to state government buildings, school districts, to local governments, and in a decade we could transform the public sector's use of renewable, clean energy in Minnesota, and by demonstrating to those businesses that we have a long-term commitment to doing so, that we could then attract those businesses in Minnesota. You know, one of those wind turbines uses 800 tons of steel. I would rather those be manufactured here in Minnesota and be using taconite to turn into steel from northeastern Minnesota. Solar energy, a similar area where we could demonstrate this kind of long-term commitment of Minnesota. And I learned as Commissioner of Economic Development is when you demonstrate a long-term commitment to a particular industry, that you become attractive for them as a place to locate and to expand. And I, as governor, would follow up on that commitment to alternative energy with going anywhere in the state or nation or world where there's a job to be gained from Minnesota.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Emmer, what would you do to encourage development of alternative energy resources?
Well, I think respectfully, Senator Dayton, you've just shown what I believe is the problem. People in government need to get out of the business of being in people's business. I think we've got to start to open up the marketplace. Solar should be an option, but there should be a marketplace for it. Wind energy should be an option. There should be a marketplace for it. All different types of energy should be explored, and we should start to allow people to do that by streamlining regulations, allow them to start to invest, not having people in government that don't have any experience creating their own business and investing their money, have people who are doing it every day and understand what risk is doing it. And we should lift the moratorium on nuclear. We should be looking at all different options for the future of our economy and our kids' future when it comes to energy. And again, too much government has been the problem.
Thank you. Mr. Horner, what would you do on?
Well, not surprisingly, I think you've both shown the problem with your policies. I mean, Senator Dayton, to promise more dollars that we don't have and we shouldn't spend is the wrong way to go. It's going to run more businesses out of the state and cause you to push income taxes down to an even lower level. And there's no two ways about it. But I also disagree with Representative Emmer. I don't think we ought to ignore the role of the public sector in helping to advance knowledge, in helping to advance innovation, and then commercialize that in the private sector. So I do think that we should move away from subsidies, and I've been the one who has said that at Farm Fest as well as at forums in the Twin Cities. The only one, I might add. But I also think that we have a role in promoting research. Look at the great research in biomass that is going on at Central Lakes College in Staples at the Ag Center, or what Morris is doing in wind, what Mankato is doing in ethanol, and understanding better how to use ethanol in modern energy, in modern engines. But I think we have to go beyond that. You know, the standards that were set to drive utilities to more renewable energy are good, and they're producing results. And we ought to hold the utilities to that, not as regulatory punitive burdens, but as incentives to move forward, to develop these new initiatives in the private marketplace. We also need to be sensitive to cost. One of the great advantages Minnesota businesses have over companies in the East and the West Coast is that we do have lower electricity prices, and we need to maintain that competitive advantage. And thirdly, we need to always keep remembering that even as we develop alternative fuels, even as we develop other sources, the most efficient energy is the energy we don't use. And so we also need to promote conservation as a thoughtful part of our energy program.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Next question goes to you, Mr. Dayton, first. Greater Minnesota needs a skilled workforce to attract new jobs. Given the state's budget problems, how would you adequately fund state colleges and universities across Greater Minnesota to provide the skilled workers? And how would you link their academic programs to the needs of employers? 2 minutes.
Sorry,
Mr. Dayton.
I'm first again.
Mr. Dayton, yes.
Well, the commitment to higher education in Minnesota has slackened in the last decade to the detriment, as students here at Minnesota State Mankato would attest, with the cutbacks in funding positions. And that's sacrificing the future of our state. We have the third highest tuition at our two-year public colleges of any state in the nation. We're in the top 10 in tuition at our MnSCU four-year universities. The tuition at the University of Minnesota is 50% higher than the average tuition in the universities, state universities of the surrounding four states. And you go to, say, Wadena Technical College, 20 years ago, they had a capital equipment budget of $1 million a year. Now it's $20,000 this last year, I'm told. So without the ability to make the investments in the technology necessary to give those students the skills to be competitive in a global economy, I mean, we're shortchanging the future of our state. Now, the next governor and legislature are going to inherit almost $6 billion projected deficit. And to square that fiscal account first is going to be the absolute requirement under the Minnesota Constitution. But as hopefully the state and national economy improve, as we have more revenues, my number one priority is education and to balance the needs from higher education to K-12 public education to early childhood education. All of those are important, but education itself, which is about half the state budget, is absolutely the top priority, because we do need to restore the investments we've made in the past that have proven most successful for the future of Minnesota. We need to give students the education they need, and it's also been predicted that more of the jobs in Minnesota than almost any other state in the future are going to require a college education. Well, the good news is those are higher paying jobs. The other side of the coin is that we need to give everyone access to our public colleges and universities so that they can all realize and achieve together that American dream. That will benefit them. That will benefit all of us in Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Mr. Emmer, adequately funding higher education and connecting it to jobs.
Well, I think the second part of your question, connecting it to jobs, is probably the most significant. But I have to say that before you can tell people what your commitment is, whether it's higher education, K-12 education, early childhood, et cetera, you got to put forth a complete and detailed balanced budget. The state of Minnesota only has a deficit in the next biennium if we are committed to spending more than we have. If we are committed to spending more than the 7 to 8% new revenue, then we have a deficit. Unless you are willing to provide a balanced budget, I suppose you can promise all kinds of things, but you can't deliver on them. Here's our promise. We put out a complete and detailed budget that tells you exactly what we'll do with funding for higher ed. It is less in the next biennium. Why? Because we're going to challenge the University of Minnesota and the MnSCU system to start to provide more affordable education. I personally, as a parent of 7, and Jackie and I have done the math, we're going to be working till we're about 120 at the rate this is going. I'm tired of hearing the leaders in our college system tell us that we're just going to have to raise tuition if you people don't give us the money we're asking for. Is anybody aware that the retirement program at the University of Minnesota provides that an employee of the University of Minnesota can contribute 2%, and the university will match it with 13% for retirement? Why is it that we're asking these young people to pay more and more tuition so that we can pay the professors a 13% match on their 2% retirement contribution? That is absolutely wrong, and people need to start talking about it. The commitment should be to challenge our higher education institutions to start to get their costs under control and provide an affordable education that we all expect our kids to have.
Thank you, Mr. Emmer. Ask the audience again. No clapping. No clapping. Thank you. No clap. No clapping. Yeah. Mr. Horner.
Listen to the answers from Senator Dayton and Representative Emmer, though. They're all about the past. They're all about what we've done over the last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. This has to be an election about the future. How are we going to innovate? How are we going to be different? We have to stop asking the question, Senator Dayton, Representative Emmer, of how much, and start asking the question of what for. What do we need to achieve as a state for prosperity, for job growth, for opportunity for all of the people in this audience? And next year, look at the opportunity we have. A new president of the university, a new chancellor of Minnesota State Colleges and Universities, and a new governor. There's our opportunity, with the right governor, with the right leadership, to really ask ourselves, what does Minnesota need? What are the outcomes we have to achieve in higher education? How are we going to get to 70% of the adult population that has some post-high school education? Because that's what all the studies say we need. And we need to be willing to put everything on the table. Do we have the right core mission for our great 2-year schools? Are we funding them appropriately? What about our 4-year schools? Should we be offering 200, 300 majors at our 4-year schools? Or should we look at a Wisconsin model where we have centers of excellence, where we have focus? Those are the kinds of critical mission, strategic central questions that we have to ask ourselves. And how do we truly get to a world-class research university on the campus of the University of Minnesota? Because I'll tell you this, when we talk about jobs, one of the great job creators of the future will be the Biomedical Discovery Center on the campus of the University of Minnesota. That's what's going to create the jobs for the future, not just science and medical jobs, but all the jobs that new industries create. And we only get there if we're willing to challenge the status quo, to be innovative, to look to the future. And you don't get there if you have your feet firmly planted in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Horner.
Now we're going to switch gears a little bit. Earlier we asked the members of the audience who had questions to submit them to us on these little sheets. And Lillian from Vernon Center posed a question which we reporters have frequently asked, and I'm not sure we've gotten complete answers to them. So Lillian will try it again tonight. Our state has a huge deficit, which she says will only continue to grow. Without cutting spending on programs or areas that you think are underfunded, what do you see needs the largest cuts? And we're going to start with Representative Emmer.
Well, thank you, Bill, and thank you, Lillian. Again, please go to our website, emmerforgovernor.com, EMMERFOR, governor.com. I'm sorry, a shameless plug. But please go look. We have put out the only detailed and balanced budget that tells you right away where we believe that we should be spending the 7 to 8% in additional revenues. We have maintained our commitment to K-12 education, which currently is $13.3 billion, and we have added $500 million to that. Why? Because we believe that it's all about throwing more education at K-12 education at the system? No. But because we are committed to K-12 and we're asking for reforms that come with it. You'll find those on the website in detail. Also, Health and Human Services is the area that we absolutely must start to tackle in the next 4 years. My friends tell me that I've cut the budget because I've put out a complete and balanced budget, again, using just the 7 to 8% in new revenues we're going to have. And yet, you know what? In Health and Human Services, we've added about $600 million. That is the area, though, going forward, we must start to address how we deliver services, those social safety net services, whether it's healthcare, housing, or food. We've got to start talking about how we do that at a state level. That's where we've got to address the spending going forward.
Gentlemen, in this segment, would you please try to hold your answers to 1 minute? And next, Mr. Horner, what areas do you think are targets for large cuts?
So do I get Dayton's 1 minute also? Okay, well then very quickly. Look, I'm the only one who has put out a budget that has fundamental reforms, structural reforms, and that's how we're going to change spending. It's not about how much we're taxing, how much we're spending right now. It's about how do we do it better in the future. And so I do agree that Health and Human Services is the way that we're going to change structurally how we spend money. And I've put out a specific proposal to deliver, to change the way we deliver services, the way we pay for those services. Just one example. Look, social service workers in counties now spend about 40% of their time filling out paperwork for the state. We've got to change that. About 40% of the property tax in many counties due directly to unfunded mandates imposed by the state. That's wasted money. We have to change that. But the only way we're going to change it is if we change how we deliver human services, tie more of the delivery to the accountability, put it at the county level, and get the state government out of the business of unnecessary unfunded mandates.
Thank you. Senator Dayton, where would you make large budget cuts?
Well, my proposal, I'll also make my pitch is on my website, www.markdayton.org, all the detail that I can't provide in 1 minute. But the basic difference among the three of us is that I would protect middle-income Minnesotans from paying higher taxes to balance the budget, and I would raise the income tax rate on the top, according to the Minnesota Department of Revenue, 4% of Minnesota income earners, in part because that same Department of Revenue says that the wealthiest people in Minnesota, top 1%, in fact, with incomes of over $1.2 million, pays only 2/3% of their income in state and local taxes compared to the rest of Minnesotans. My two colleagues here would raise, Mr. Horner talks about tax reform is to extend the sales tax to clothing and to consumer services like haircuts and car repairs. I don't consider that reform. I consider that increasing the tax burden on middle-income taxpayers. Similarly, if property taxes go up, both of those taxes fall more heavily on middle-income taxpayers than of the other taxes. So I believe I'll make taxes fairer, and their proposals will increase the tax burden on middle-income Minnesotans.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Another audience question. No clapping, please. I'm going to need armed guards here pretty soon, I think. This is a question from Andrew from Waseca, Minnesota, and I think it's one that resonates with a lot of small school districts across Minnesota. 1 minute here on this, and Mr. Horner, you go first. How do you plan to address the many school districts statewide who've been forced to eliminate classes, increase sizes, have no electives, and no extracurricular activities, all of which are preventing our students from being well-rounded and well-educated?
Well, the first thing you don't do, and Senator Dayton, to your point that you're going to protect low-income taxpayers, maybe, but you'll do it at the expense of their jobs, and that's not a trade-off I'm willing to make. On protecting school districts, we have to stop the bad kinds of policies that came out of this past legislative session, where they took $3 billion, borrowed it from the school districts, and kicked the problem down the road. I think we do need to adequately fund school districts, but we also need to change how schools operate. So I would move away from No Child Left Behind. Give teachers the authority, the opportunity, the responsibility to teach. Let them teach the way they know how, unshackle their hands from the rigidity of No Child Left Behind, and let them teach. We need to look at consolidation. There are 5 or 6 school districts in northwestern Minnesota within 50 miles of each other where we could consolidate the districts, reduce the administrative overhead, put the money into the classroom. And I also, while I can't pay back the deferral right now, I would pay the interest on any operating loans that they have to take out. We've got to get them to 5-day weeks at least.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Mr. Dayton, your turn.
Well, Andrew, the overcrowded classrooms, the 4-day school weeks you and others have described, is a direct result of the state reducing per pupil aid by $1,300 after inflation. And that money has also caused, cut in funding has also caused an increase in property taxes throughout Minnesota. So my budget calls for an increase of $1 billion in state funding for public K-12 education the next biennium. It also recognizes that part of that increase is necessary because they're expected to have about 14,000 more students in our public schools over those 2 years. And that money would enable us to lower class sizes, to have the kind of individual diagnostic testing which has been proven effective. School districts like Lakeville, St. Croix Education District, where we help children, especially in the early grades, to identify reading difficulties, overcome those difficulties, so by the end of the school year they're reading at or above grade level. That's life transforming. That means they're poised then to become successful learners and successful adults.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Mr. Emmer, 1 minute.
Senator, first off, it sounds good. You can make all kinds of promises, but when you don't present a detailed and balanced budget, when you got a $1 billion hole in your budget, you can't make good on the promises you're making. And this statement, our funding has gone up. Our per pupil funding has definitely gone up in the last decade. Here's the problem. You got to equalize the funding. You have to make sure that any decisions we're making are in the best interest of the student and not in the interest of the union boss that is frankly interrupting all. Stopping
ask
all
you to
reform.
refrain from clapping. Thank you.
And then it's briefly, measure, report, and reward. It's not just about more money, even though we're increasing it. It's about measuring outcomes. It's about reporting those outcomes to parents so they can make educated decisions, and to teachers so they know they're performing. And it's about rewarding good schools and good teachers by paying them more.
Thank you, Mr. Emmer. Next question.
Next question comes from Ed from Mankato. Ed says, Minnesota's prevailing wage law in effect increases the cost of state construction projects. Would you advocate repeal of this law? And Senator Dayton, let's start with you.
No, I would not. I think that's a way in which you provide income, and we want people to receive income commensurate with their skills and their talents, and they in turn spend those dollars in local businesses and boost the economy. There are ways in which we can make those Minnesota companies more competitive. We should look at what Wisconsin's done, which is a bidding preference for in-state businesses. A contractor in Bagley told me that if he is a highway construction contractor, if he gets a project in South Dakota, he has to pay an excise tax equal to 2% of the value of the highway equipment that he's hauling across state lines. So we do need to look at ways to recognize the competition that Minnesota employers are in relative to other states. But in terms of the prevailing wage, I would protect that wage.
Representative Emmer, would you repeal the prevailing wage law?
Well, again, that's not up to the governor. bill. That's going to be up to the state legislature. From my perspective, when it comes to the prevailing wage law, the idea was to make sure that people that are working on certain projects are getting a livable wage or getting a competitive wage. I don't think it's working that way right now. That's my personal view. I think that it's actually adding to costs of projects and actually pricing people out of the marketplace. But I think, again, that's up to the legislature. If the legislature addresses prevailing wage, that's something that the governor would absolutely have to respond to.
Mr. Horner, would you advocate repealing the...
I want to know what happened to that CEO leadership. Look, you can't duck tough issues just because they're tough issues and pawn them off on the legislature. And Senator, you can't just keep saying yes to every special interest that crosses your path. The reality is that there are a lot of areas of the state where prevailing wage isn't working the way it was intended. Go down to Austin, and I understand you were down there today. They'll tell you that when they have to pay wages equivalent to the southern Twin Cities metro area, that doesn't work in Austin, Minnesota. Can we have a prevailing wage that works, that is effective, that is fair, that works in the way that it was intended? Absolutely, but only if we have the courage, the leadership to take on these issues, to look to the future, and to turn your back on special interests.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Another question on wages, and it goes to you, Mr. Emmer. Would you support a pay freeze for all government employees, state, local, to help solve the budget deficit?
I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you, Joe. What did you say?
Let me say it again. I'll get a little closer here. Would you support a pay freeze for all government employees, state, local, schools, to help solve the budget deficit?
Joe, I think we've already done that. I think it's time to actually look at redesigning government itself. And, you know, I have to address this with Senator Dayton because he keeps making the statement that what we're proposing will raise property taxes. I'm the only one up here who has sat on a city council, and I'll tell you what, the governor doesn't raise our property taxes. Local governments do. And yes, some of their decisions are made based upon how they're going to fund certain services that their citizens expect them to provide. But that living within our means has to happen at the state level, the county level, and the local level. When it comes to freezing wages, that's a short-term solution. We have to actually redesign government to make it smaller and more efficient, and we have to start growing jobs again in the state of Minnesota because new jobs in the private sector are what drives new revenues that actually pay for the services people expect from government.
Thank you, Mr. Emmer. Mr. Horner, your turn.
You know, pay cut for public employees is one of those great bumper sticker issues, but that's not really the issue. As Representative Emmer said, in most of the last several years, public employees already have taken a pay cut. What we ought to do is two things. One is that we need to freeze all hiring and look at where we have too many people. And one of the things we'll find is that Minnesota has a very top-heavy bureaucracy. Not too many public workers necessarily, but we have a lot of supervisors. We need to make some efficiencies there. But secondly, we need to take on the challenge of public pensions. And I'm the only candidate who has had the courage to address that. Again, that's the future. That's the long-term challenge. We have to say to unions, look, we'll protect retirees, we'll protect older workers, we'll fulfill our commitment to them. But we do need to ask current workers to pay a little bit more. Maybe it's not a higher contribution, maybe it's extending the retirement age. And then we're going to have to say to taxpayers, we need to transition new workers to a defined contribution plan, and taxpayers, we're going to ask you to pay a little bit right now so you don't get crushed in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Question to you, Mr. Dayton.
Well, as both my colleagues have said, most state employees have already endured wage freezes and layoffs. The average teacher salary in Minnesota is below the national average. As I said earlier, Governor Plenty's reduced the state workforce by 11%. Cities like Austin have told me today they'll cut back 50 positions. Minuscule system, the workers have endured wage freezes. So, you know, everything's going to have to be budgeted within the context of what the next governor and legislature have inherited, a $5.8 billion deficit. And that's something that, you know, back in the previous recession in the 80s, Governor Quee, honorable that he was, called special sessions to provide the next governor and legislature with a balanced budget. But you know, to continue to balance the budget on the backs of public employees, I think is just continuing the practices of Governor Plenty, and that is unfair.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Next question.
Next question comes from Carol from Mankato. Carol writes, people with disabilities have seen cuts to services and programs year after year after year. Under your administration, what can people with disabilities expect? Mr. Horner.
I'm sorry. Well, I think under my administration, what people with disabilities can expect is respect. I mean, that will make sure that those people who need assistance from the government that are vulnerable will receive that. I think that it was appalling that we cut services for personal care attendants, for example. I mean, that's how a lot of disabled Minnesotans are able to get back into the mainstream of jobs and living. You know, we did a forum over at the University of Minnesota the other day. A student came up to me and asked me that very question, and I said, you know, we ought to make sure that things like personal care attendants are funded. He said, I'm glad that you said that. I have 12 different disabilities. Without a personal care attendant, I wouldn't be here, and yet I'm going to graduate from the University of Minnesota and live a productive life. That's where we need to make our investments.
Senator Dayton.
Well, I agree about the need to provide the funding through personal care attendants and others, and it was very distressing to find a couple years ago when there were evidence that some people were overbilling. In fact, they were billing for their services for more than 24 hours a day, that under Governor Plenty, the Department of Management and Budget had eliminated the 7 internal audit positions that would provide that kind of internal oversight. As a state auditor, I learned if you want to make sure that the dollars are being expended properly, you have to have an audit oversight function. So we need to make sure that all those dollars are going to the intended beneficiaries of those services. And then in terms of the broader health care for people with disabilities and others, early opt-in for Medicaid, which I would sign on the first day in office, provides $1.4 billion in federal funding that enables hospitals throughout greater Minnesota, like Emmanuel St. Joseph's, who would receive over $6 million here in Mankato, to receive the funding necessary to provide better quality health care services to all Minnesotans.
Representative Emmer, what could people with disabilities expect from you?
As I've already indicated, you can see our budget. And it is a complete budget within the money we have, 7 to 8% growth. $2.5 billion hole in his budget, $1 billion plus with spending promises continuing to be made. The Health and Human Services area, we've increased by $600 million. You fund your priorities, and our priorities are children, disabled, seniors, nursing homes, veterans, not able-bodied adults. And then I've got to say something, Senator Dayton. I believe you just said that we cannot continue to balance the budget on the backs of public servants, and that's just wrong. You know what? There's a lot of people that are asked outside of government to continue to pay for the unrestrained growth of government that are actually carrying this thing. And we've got to remember, you cannot continue to just grow spending foolishly and without responsibility for the people that are being asked to pay that bill. Those are the people we need to be concerned of.
Thank you, Mr. Emmer. Next question from the audience comes from Paul from Mankato, and it would go to you first, Mr. Dayton. No one can do everything, but almost everyone can do something. As governor, what would you do to ensure that our human services help each client to become as independent as possible rather than being a long-term burden on the taxpayers?
Well, with the exception of people who have severe disabilities, I think that's what, and even people with disabilities, I mean, that's what people want and aspire to. You know, back in the mid-1990s, when the Congress froze back then the funding, and with the employment growth that occurred under President Clinton and a Republican Congress and a growing economy, there was more dollars being able to be spent per individual recipient in supportive services. They found that what was most people who do provide direct social service understand, if you provide transportation, you provide counseling, job applications, the child care that employees need, that you provide all the array of those supportive services that people do move into employment, and they stay in employment. That's what people want. They want a chance to earn a living. The best anti-poverty program is a job. So if we go back to recognizing that aspiration of everyone who can conceivably be a productive member of our society, recognize that's crucial to their own individual self-esteem, help them attain that, we'll see that success.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Mr. Emmer, question to you.
The answer to the question, Paul, is growing jobs in the state of Minnesota and not allowing government to keep growing at double-digit percentages every 2 years. I don't know if people realize that at the end of this biennium, from 2001 to 2011, our state's general fund spending will have grown by $6.5 billion, almost $6.5 billion. That's roughly about 20% of our total, almost $31 billion general fund budget. These two gentlemen believe that in just the next 2 years, our state's general fund spending should grow by almost $8 billion in just the next 2 years. First, it's controlling the growth of government. Second, it's growing jobs again in the state of Minnesota, because if you grow jobs again, you got people, you have places for people to work, but more importantly, you can also pay for the services you expect government to provide.
Thank you, Mr. Emmer. Mr. Horner.
Well, if only things were that simple, we'd all be better off. But they're not, of course. Of course we need to create an economy that promotes jobs. We need good tax policy. We need to streamline the regulatory process. We need good education. But jobs, it's easy for us to sit here and say, well, we ought to have more jobs. What about that 55-year-old who did everything right and the economy pulled the rug out from under him or her? Do we just say, go get a job when there are no jobs out there, when they don't have the skills for the jobs that are available? We have to think about education as lifelong learning, including job training, and make sure people have the skills so that they can get the jobs that the kind of economy that I'm going to help promote makes available to us. We need to think about health care. So many people are spiraling into bankruptcy because of health care. And there are a couple of things we need to do. Restructure the system so that small employers again can provide health coverage to their workers and do the early opt-in to Medicaid. And then as Senator Dayton said, we do need to provide supportive services for those families in crisis, and we need to provide mortgage counseling so people can keep their homes.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Next question.
Next question comes from Whitney from Wells. He says, currently government-funded programs and organizations must spend all their allocated money within the year or risk less funding the next year, thus creating a disincentive for responsible spending. Do you have a plan to address this in Minnesota? And we'll start with you, Representative Emmer.
Yes. We've got to have what some people refer to as zero-based budgeting. I would call it the same concept as balancing the family checkbook. You don't spend money you don't have. You don't base your budgets off what you want to spend. You base your budgets off what you have to spend. Unfortunately, our government seems to think, Whitney, that we're going to just grow government almost 20% in the next 2 years. Government wants to spend that. Health and Human Services alone scheduled itself for a 32% growth in just 2 years. Think about this, Whitney. If we don't get to balancing our budgets based on what we have as opposed to what we want to have, if we don't get back to growing new jobs so we have additional revenues, Health and Human Services alone, and both of these gentlemen have committed to spending that 32% over the next 2 years. If that goes unchecked, that one area of government will eat up the entire budget within a decade. Then there will be no money for K-12 education, no money for public safety, roads, bridges, etc.
Mr. Horner, same question to you.
Well, it goes back to what I said I would tell my cabinet in that first meeting, and that is we start with outcomes. What is it that we need to accomplish as a state to be prosperous, to thrive, to create a good environment for everyone? We start with the outcomes that we need to achieve, and then we measure progress against those outcomes, not against how much money we're spending. We don't set budgets against what worked in the past, what didn't work in the past. We certainly don't set budgets against what special interests tell us to do. We set budgets against what do we need to achieve as a state. And then we hold those programs accountable. So what I've proposed is that we ought to be absolutely transparent. We ought to create websites where we have public programs on the website. Here are the outcomes that we expect from them. Here are the measures. Here's how they're doing against those measures. And everybody can take a look and everybody can judge. And that's how we engage Minnesotans in the process so that we're all holding government accountable.
Thank you. Senator Dayton?
I have a book in my library titled The Death of Common Sense. And what Whitney just described is one of those procedures that defies common sense. When I was state auditor and through our audits, we charged fees to the clients' local governments, and so I asked the then Department of Finance, shouldn't our budget proposal be credited with the revenues that our services brought in? No, that wasn't possible. You just look at the expenses on one side, the revenues on a totally separate ledger. Again, defies common sense. I've talked to management consultants in the private sector who've worked with Democratic governors and Republican governors across this country, saved hundreds of millions of dollars, so there's been no interest. by the state of Minnesota in the last number of years to looking for those cost-saving administrative efficiencies. I will look for them. I will bring my agency heads in with that responsibility. I'll bring outside private sector consultants come in because I want to assure Minnesota taxpayers that every single one of their dollars is being expended as effectively and efficiently as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. We'll go to the next audience question. It's from North Mankato. Is the civil commitment of sex offenders the best solution to protect the public from the predators after their prison terms end? Would you consider indeterminate sentencing? Treatment does not seem to be a cure and is very expensive. This goes to you, Mr. Horner.
Is civil commitment the best solution? No, but we haven't figured out a better one. And so do we have to look at indeterminate sentencing? Of course. I mean, what we're talking about are the most heinous offenders, the worst of the worst. And we do need to figure out how to keep them off the streets. I, like a lot of people, worry about the constitutional rights that are in jeopardy. But I think first and foremost, we have to worry about the safety of the public. And I think what we've seen is that in these kinds of heinous offenses, these kinds of offenders, that we do need to make sure that they are that the public is safe from those offenders.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. The question goes to you, Mr. Dayton.
Well, public safety absolutely needs to be the paramount concern, and with the criminal sentencing having determinate sentencing, except in cases of life sentences without the possibility of parole, the ability to then have the civil commitment to follow that and allows for that then kind of indeterminate sentencing, as we've seen a recent celebrated instance where an individual committed a heinous sexual assault a number of years ago, was scheduled to be released after serving the criminal sentence, and it was possible through the procedure to continue to keep that person incarcerated for an indeterminate period of time because it was the experts judged that he was not rehabilitated and was not susceptible to rehabilitation. So absolutely those procedures, and if there are deficiencies, I'll support those because the protection of the public is absolutely paramount, and that's why I'm honored to have the endorsement of the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association. They recognize my commitment to public safety.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Mr. Emmer?
Joe, I already have a record on this. Civil commitment should be eliminated, and the worst of the worst sex offenders should be sentenced indeterminately. Absolutely.
Thank you. Next question.
Next question comes from Mankato, and it is, we'll start with you, Senator Dayton. What will you do to keep businesses from migrating out of Minnesota to states with lower taxes?
Well, as I learned when I was Commissioner of Economic Development, why do businesses choose to locate or expand in Minnesota? And the number one reason was always well-educated, hardworking, productive citizens. Along with that was a good health care system, with good state and local government services, good infrastructure. The deterioration of our highways in greater Minnesota, the congestion due to lack of investments in our urban highways and in public transit have been serious detraction for the quality of lives for our citizens as well as for businesses. So we need to focus on all of those areas, and we need to keep taxes competitive with other states. We need to provide the kind of targeted incentives, especially for those in border communities, that will enable them to be competitive with their immediate neighbors. But at long term, the experts have said that the best success for Minnesota will be to continue to have the best education system in the world, starting with early childhood, K-12, and higher education. If those will be the entrepreneurs of the future, locating and starting up businesses, those will be the people that they will hire to have successful businesses.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Emmer, what would you do to keep businesses from moving to low-tax states?
Get government to live within its means according to the budget that we've already put out, within the 7 to 8% of new revenues. Then we would make Minnesota competitive. It is true that Minnesota doesn't have to be the cheapest place to do business in the world or the country because we have the best workforce. In fact, our workforce is not only the envy of the United States, but probably the envy of many countries in the world. But you do have to be competitive. We have to reduce the corporate franchise tax. Right now, 9.8%. When it's combined with the federal tax, we are the third highest in the world. You reduce reduce that by a point in each of the next 2 years, puts approximately $360 million into the hands of our businesses to start hiring and making capital purchases. 10% exclusion on gross earnings for small businesses, the LLCs, the S corporations that file personal income taxes. Over the next 2 years, that'll put $160 million roughly into the hands of small business to invest and reinvest in their most important resource, which are people. And then we've talked about expanding the angel investment tax credit, expanding the research and development tax credit, and reducing the commercial property tax. You do those things along with streamlining government so it works better for business, you will attract new business and allow existing businesses to start to thrive again.
Mr. Horner, how will you keep businesses in Minnesota?
Well, I think there are several things we need to do. First of all, we do need to be a state that has top talent. What we educate, what we develop on our own. But Senator Dayton, we also need to be a state that is able to recruit top talent into Minnesota. And if we raise state income tax 30 to 40%, the companies that need to do business in Minnesota, that we want to do business in Minnesota, aren't going to be recruiting in the management caliber talent that they need, and they'll tell you that. Secondly, we do need to be a state of innovation. We need to invest in research, both basic and applied research at our universities around the state. Thirdly, we do need a tax structure that works. Not a tax system based on the past, but one that is looking to the future, one that takes less reliance puts less reliance on the income tax and looks at a consumption tax, reduce the corporate tax, create incentives for investment. We also need to make sure that we're keeping costs under control, including health care costs, and that's going to take structural reform. And lastly, we need to be a state that offers the kind of amenities that businesses want. Great natural arts, or natural amenities, arts, and Major League sports.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Last audience question here, and we're running a little tight, so you might want to speed up the answer a little bit. As governor, what would you do to stop voter fraud in Minnesota? Mr. Emmer.
Well, first and foremost, I've carried the photo ID bill for the last 6 years in the Minnesota House of Representatives. 8 out of 10 Minnesotans believe that we should show a photo identification when we go in to vote at the polling place. I think that's number one. And then there are several other things that you could do as well, but I'll keep the time short. That would be number one.
Thank you. Mr. Horner.
Well, the good news is that there's not a lot of evidence of voter fraud in Minnesota. And so first, we need to make...
I ask the audience to not laugh. In courtesy to the candidate, thank you, Mr. Horner. Can you continue, please?
Yeah. First of all, there's not a lot of evidence that there's a lot of voter fraud in Minnesota, and so we need to make sure that we're continuing the education so that people understand how the system works. Secondly, I would agree with photo ID. I do think that we need to move to that system.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Mr. Dayton.
Well, upholding the integrity of the election process is a shared Minnesota commitment. But State Senator Fritz Knock, Republican, who was part of the recount last time in the celebrated Senate recount, said that the person with the most got the most votes won the election. And over that 6-month period, over a careful review with the Secretary of State and the Chief Justice of Minnesota Supreme Court and another Associate Justice were both appointed by Governor Pawlenty in a very transparent process. The integrity of the Minnesota election process was upheld. And if I'm governor, I will continue to uphold that.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton.
Before we go to closing statements, we would like to acknowledge that tonight's debate was made possible through the financial support of the Otto Bremer Foundation, Best Buy, Target Corporation, and Blandin Foundation. We'd like to thank the Minnesota State University Mankato and the student government for hosting Debate Minnesota tonight, and special thanks to Pioneer and KSMQ Public Television, Minnesota News Network, and Minnesota Public Radio for broadcasting tonight's debate. And thanks also to the other television, radio, print media, bloggers, and Twitterers in the audience. Most importantly, we thank you for coming, listening in, or watching from home. Our first closing statement, Representative Emmer.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Joe. Again, thank you, everybody here, the sponsors that you just read off, Minnesota State, Mankato. Thank you for having us. Thank you for being part of the process. Again, there's a choice to be made on November 2nd. The choice is very clear and distinct. On the one side, there is the offer that we're going to grow government yet again at an unsustainable and I believe not responsible pace, almost 20% in just the next 2 years. And even if you agree with that, folks, What taxes are we going to raise 2 years from now? It's time to take ownership of our future and our children's future. It's time to say that government must live within its means, and that means the 7 to 8% in new revenues that we will have in the next legislative session. And then we've got to do everything we can to start growing jobs again in the state of Minnesota. That's the choice to be made on November 2nd. I hope you will agree with the vision that we have for the future of this state, and I hope you will all show up on November 2nd to vote and help us make our vision reality in the state of Minnesota. Thank you very much.
Please hold your applause, and courtesy to the other candidates, please hold your applause. Mr. Horner.
Look what's happening in this week alone. Representative Emmer, Senator Dayton, inviting national special interest groups to come into our state and spend millions of dollars on negative advertising. Not for the future of Minnesota, but for these national special interest groups to get one more trophy in their trophy case. That's what we need to resist. It's why I've rejected PAC contributions. You know, I think that Governor Emmer, would he move the state a little bit to the right? Without question. Governor Dayton, to the left a couple steps? Absolutely. We can't be a state that moves sideways, however. We need to be a state that moves to the future. The question in this election is whether or not Minnesotans, whether you as voters, will have the courage to vote for the best governor. The governor that Minnesota newspapers, former governors, almost unanimously have said would be the best governor for Minnesota, or are you going to vote out of fear? I'm asking you to vote for your future, to vote for what you know is right, to vote for Minnesota. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Please hold your applause. Thank you.
And Senator Dayton, you get the last word.
Thank you to Minnesota State Mankato, Debate Minnesota. As I said at the outset, this election is about your future and the future of our state. It's about the commitment to keeping taxes protected for the middle class that I've demonstrated, or raising taxes on the middle class through higher property taxes, higher sales tax, which will increase the tax burden on our middle income families and on small businesses. And then we need to invest those revenues in education. Here we are at Minnesota State Mankato, which has suffered serious cuts in the availability of education opportunities for young people, as is the case all over Minnesota. You're our future. The students here today and all over the state will be the future leaders, the future business entrepreneurs, the future doctors, scientists, lawyers, nurses. We'll depend upon all of us for our success. We need to give you the affordable education, and that unfortunately is a commitment that's slacked in Minnesota in recent years. I will restore that commitment. I will restore the commitment to the future of the state, and together we will create a better Minnesota.
Thank you. That ends our debate. Thank you and good night.